Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Devin Banerjee, editor-at-large at LinkedIn, and I'm excited to be joined by Alison Borland, Executive Vice President of Wealth Solutions and Strategy at Alight. Today we're discussing strategies to improve employee well-being, productivity, and retention amid this backdrop that we're all seeing called the Great Resignation. We also want to hear from you. Use that chat section on the right of your screen to post questions for Alison and to share your own take on these topics. I'll incorporate some of that into our conversation. With that, let's get started. Alison, I want to ask you to set the scene for us. How has this pandemic changed the nature of work and the employee-employer relationship?
Yeah, well, Devin, some of this is kind of obvious, right? When you think about what everyone's been dealing with, whether it's furloughs, whether it's virtual school, whether it's navigating health issues during the pandemic, the number of problems and challenges weighing on the shoulders of the workforce, it's hard to even count them, right? So their needs and their expectations of their employers are different. Now, if you look at what employers were already doing, they were focused in three key areas. They were focused on digital transformation, they were focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they were focused on well-being. Well, interestingly, the urgency of all three of those has only heightened because of the pandemic and because of those challenges and needs that we just talked about. Well-being, for example, in particular, took a big hit. So at the beginning of the year, we did a workforce survey, and only 40% of respondents reported a positive well-being. And unfortunately, scores were even worse for women, for minorities, and for the younger generations. So there's a lot of weight, a lot of burden, and so it's not surprising with these shifting needs. They're looking at their employer and they're saying, the labor market's pretty great. Wonder if I should consider another employer who may be able to better meet my needs. So it's creating a lot of friction in the environment.
Let's home in on well-being. It's in such sharp focus right now, and yet employee well-being has different definitions or different meanings to different employers. From your perspective, what does well-being at work mean and look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you say the word well-being, it tends to be something that if you have it, you tend to know it. And if you don't have positive well-being, you definitely know it. But we do talk about it a little bit differently when it comes to the workforce. And we tend to think about it across four dimensions. The first being a healthy body. So that's physical well-being. The second is a healthy mind. So that's mental well-being, as well as social and emotional well-being. There's the importance of a healthy wallet. So financial well-being. Can I, live within my means today and still have room to prepare for the future, yet also be ready for anything unexpected that happens along the way? And then fourth, a healthy life, which really captures a lot of other less specific things like career and work well-being. Am I satisfied with my manager and when I come to work every day? Or caregiving, right? So it can encompass all of those things. So when we talk about well-being at work and providing a state of well-being for employees, we think it's really important to consider all four of those dimensions, and they should all work together. Historically, a lot of employers have used a very siloed approach.
I want to remind our viewers to vote in the poll on the right side of your screen. We'll incorporate the results during our session. Also take advantage of that chat section to pose questions for Alison. I'll pose some of them to her in just a few minutes. So Alison, at the end of your last response, you mentioned organizations are struggling a little bit to address well-being with their employees. Why is that?
You might immediately say, well, maybe there just aren't the solutions there to address it. But ironically, that's not the problem. What we see is with the broader industry digital transformation, there's an absolute proliferation of solutions and apps and programs that employers can implement to help a lot of different solutions across all four dimensions of well-being. And when we work with organizations, we sometimes find that they have literally dozens of different programs available for their participants, often at a meaningful cost. And so generally the problem isn't that there aren't programs out there to help. The problem is effectiveness and utilization and engagement. So a couple of examples. One organization that spends billions of dollars on healthcare every year, when they look under the covers, critical illness is a really important protection benefit. But when they looked, Their lower income workers, only 7% were utilizing critical illness. So even if the programs are there, getting the right workers to use the right programs is really hard. Another example that we've seen multiple times is lower income workers tend to gravitate toward the most expensive healthcare plans because perhaps they're worried about that large deductible. So they're hurting themselves in the process and hurting their financial well-being because of perhaps a sub-optimization of their healthcare choices. So what's happening is when you have these dozens of programs, each one is trying to maximize its utilization, and the workforce is caught in the middle because they're getting communication and outreach from dozens of programs, many of which aren't relevant to them, and they're overwhelmed and they simply check out. So in spite of the fact that programs are available, they're not being utilized and they're not effective much of the time for a large workforce.
So those are some serious challenges. We have many organizational leaders joining us in this session. What can they do to address these challenges?
Well, what we've started to think about, and some employers are, on the leading edge here, is the first step is to take an inventory. Take an inventory of all of the programs that you already have available. And sometimes that could mean going a little bit deeper, right? Sometimes an EAP may have a financial wellness program inside that you hadn't really thought about. So do a full inventory of all of the plans and programs. And then on the other side, understand what your people needs. What is the workforce looking for? Look at the data. Use a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. We're working with employers who are looking at savings and investing behavior by race and ethnicity. They're looking at healthcare disparities by gender, by socioeconomic status. We really understand what's going to make a difference for the workforce. And then by having those two sets of data, you can identify the gaps in case there are programs that would be beneficial. So that's step one. And then step two, you have to think about how do we get the right programs to the right people when they need it. So if you have an individual who has indicative biometrics for diabetes, how do you ensure she's aware of the management program that she can sign up for? How do you find the individuals who are doing really well in their 401k, but they're saving zero in their HSA, right, to their own detriment? How do you find and engage those? How do you help the working mother who's sandwiched between elder care and childcare and doesn't even have time to breathe, much less go out and see if there's an employer program who can help her? How do you engage and how do you reach out so that that individual, that employee feels like she's an audience of one, and everything that she received is for her own best interests, right, and relevant and personal, specific to her? That's what we think is sort of that holy grail of having an overall end-to-end well-being program that works.
So taking that inventory and collecting those data sounds straightforward enough, but we all know it's quite challenging to implement effectively. From your vantage point, what's working and what isn't?
Well, you're right. It is harder than I probably just made it sound, right? If it were easy, we would have all done it by now. So there's not really a silver bullet, but we're starting to learn some things from experience that are starting to make a difference. We already talked about what doesn't work is dozens of programs all sending out communications and reaching out to the same group. But if you think about this, if there's a lot of data across, health, across wealth and retirement, across payroll data, and then there's also subjective data, right? Individuals or workers may have entered or responded to surveys or provided other input about their personal situation. If we can pull all of that data together to prioritize and focus on what's most important to each individual, then we have objective and subjective inputs, and that's a really important component of the solution. Second, we need to understand how specific individuals engage. Are they mostly on their emails on Tuesday? Do they respond better to text? What is my own personal preference? How do I engage? And if you can use that as an employer, you're going to engage me much more. So if you put all of that together and we go out with very targeted goals, we've seen progress, we've seen a difference. So we used that approach and focused on teledoc with one employer, and utilization went up 50%, right? Exceeded expectations. Wow. With another employer, we did go out to those heavy 401k savers and highlighted the importance of HSA, and we got 6% of them with just one campaign to start saving in their HSA. Third employer was all focused on retirement. And so they had created this special page that no one was looking at. So we used that outreach. We got a lot of those individuals onto that page, and they increased their savings rate at double the rate. So there are signs of positivity and of potential outcomes if we just continue to leverage and focus on the data and AI that we can use to get the right messages to the right people to improve their well-being.
Yeah, those are some fascinating results with your clients so far. A reminder to the viewers to vote in the poll on the right side of your screen. Alison, so far, a majority of our respondents say the pandemic has significantly impacted their workforce investments. So keep voting in that poll. We'd love to see the final results. Alison, some of the drivers of all of these things we're talking about, obviously the pandemic, and other challenges over the past 18, 24 months. Do you think these are temporary or permanent, the effects of these things?
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, if you think about the three areas I talked about earlier, digital transformation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and well-being, absolutely permanent. They've only become more important. And with that, the expectations have heightened, and we expect those to continue to be first and foremost on every company agenda in the future. So that part we think is permanent. However, some of the impact of the pandemic, such as we keep talking about the Great Resignation and some of the labor pressure, may be permanent across the board, but may not be permanent for any individual organization. And so what we're seeing organizations try to do, led by HR, is to say, how do we turn this around and make it an advantage? If we can solve these problems, if we can create and transform that employee experience, if we can actually improve the well-being of our workforce, so when they come to work, they feel welcome, they feel included, and they have a more positive sense of well-being, it can be an attraction engine and a retention engine that can benefit the business. So it's fascinating to watch different organizations try to raise the bar and experiment, right? Because we're sort of in a new world, heightened by the hybrid nature of it, and make a difference and see some positive results. Now, to be fair, I'm not talking about some of the things that have been tried that haven't gone so well. That's always true as well, but you have to do that to learn. So it's a very, I'd say, innovative time, and hopefully that innovation sort of lens will also be permanent. That would be my hope.
So as that innovation continues and employers continue raising the bar and experimenting, what do you think things will look like in 3 to 5 years if we chat again about the benefits experience at that time?
Yeah, it's really fun to think about. I will say, if you had asked me that question 3 to 5 years ago, I never would have imagined the world in which we're living today. But in 3 to 5 years, maybe a couple of trends or a couple of things that I think could evolve. One of the biggest outcomes that we're seeing, or needs we're seeing from the workforce right now, is choice and flexibility, right? Every individual has a unique characteristic, unique family situation, unique pressures and burdens on their shoulders, and they need to respond to those. And benefits have historically been a little bit of a blunt object, and we talk about a lot of that with our clients, and that, there's healthcare and there's retirement. So if we think forward about what's possible, if you take some of the core foundational, the very basic minimum benefits and set those aside and say, yep, we're going to provide those to everybody. What if we could create a pool of dollars or complete choice and flexibility powered by data and machine learning, so that you, Devin, we're going to propose and give you a personalized, curated suite of end-to-end benefits that are way beyond the traditional benefits that can make your work and your life better. And you can pull all of the different levers, and you can do it all in one spot. I think that's where we will be able to go, given the digital transformation that's happened and all of the investments in data and AI and in machine learning. And then the second way I talk about where I think we can go is about the overall experience, right? The employee experience is often disjointed, so many places to go, so many things to do just for our own internal management. And if we can pull all of that together and create that integrated ecosystem, so individual employees have one place to go where they can get, not just they can do their transactions and do what they need to do for work, but we have an opportunity to engage them in that time with additional programs, plans, benefits, options to improve their well-being. They're reflective and built around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're there to make their life better. It's really potentially game-changing. So it's the content and the plans and the choice and flexibility, and then there's the experience around it that they can do in theory, mobile, on their mobile device. It could be that simple, via web, via a coach, a digital coach, a real coach. The opportunities are endless. So we would love to see the world move in that direction. We're seeing signs of it already, and it's pretty exciting. So we'll have to see 3 to 5 years if the world has changed as much as it has in the last 3 to 5. Hopefully in a more positive direction, but fingers crossed about that.
A reminder to our viewers to use the chat section on your screen to pose questions for Alison. Alison, I want to bring you a question from Laura. Laura says, do you think enhanced benefits focused on well-being can actually impact this great resignation in a material way? Because often we're hearing it's wages, wages, wages. What about the benefits experience? Can that have a material impact on this great resignation?
We actually think the benefits experience can be extremely important. And when we look at various surveys, there was an interesting one from McKinsey that came out not long ago. While wages are always important, there's also a sense, and the survey data would show that it's about feeling good at work. It's about being trusting in your manager. It's about having a state of positive well-being, and those benefits can impact that. And I think we all probably have our own personal experiences with those around us, and in working and talking with other employers, that it can really make a difference. So there's going to be wage pressure for sure, but if you can make a difference in that person's life when they're having a health crisis or going through a divorce or getting married or having a child, and impacting their life event in a positive way, it lasts, it sticks, and it matters. And all of the individuals around them care about it. So it can make a difference. And we see that in our data. We see it in our survey data. There's a lot of correlation between individuals who say they have a positive well-being at work with their inclination to stay at the company. So absolutely, definitely more than wages.
Alison, when designing a holistic benefit experience, parts of the experience carry more weight when trying to attract talent, parts carry more weight when retaining talent, others play a role in making the workforce more productive and successful on an ongoing basis. How can employers balance all of these when designing that holistic benefits experience?
Yeah, that can be a challenge, but we've seen a lot of innovation across all of those areas. So if you think about the optimal experience that you want to deliver to retain, right, to an existing employee, if you can package that up in a way to show it in a part of the hiring process and say, this is what your experience is going to be. This is what your benefits are going to look like. Here's how you're going to interact with us. So they actually see it and experience it before they're hired. That's a way that we're starting to see used as a tool in recruiting. So they can actually see a sample of what their total rewards will look like, quantified as well as qualitative, in one place in a digital platform. So you can expand the package end to end, hire all the way through retirement, and leverage the technology to do that and showcase it in a way. Now, the way you actually design the underlying programs, if you incorporate sufficient choice and flexibility, back to those two magic words, you have the ability to flex the system. An individual has the ability to flex those benefits so they can meet their needs all along the way, from their first day of hire up to and through retirement. So it really is back to that theme also of innovation and the new thought and the new thinking that's going in to reflect the diversity and inclusion needs of the workforce, as well as taking advantage of that digital transformation to drive well-being end to end, start to finish.
Alison, final question for you. We have several HR leaders joining us right now in this session. What trends are you noticing in HR talent itself these days? Is demand for benefits specialists on the rise? How is their role evolving?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I have to give just a warm reach out to all of our friends in HR. What we're experiencing with our clients is tremendous burden and pressure of the entire workforce sort of resting on their shoulders. And something we've experienced and watched over the past couple of years is there hasn't been tremendous amount of growth in hiring in the size and of the staff and of the HR teams. So whether it's in benefits or in talent or whatever, we're seeing our HR friends being asked to do more with less, and having to lean on others for help, and also internalizing the challenges and the burdens of the entire workforce. So it's a tough time right now, and we like I said, I just sort of want to reach out and shout out to all the great work that's being done.
Yeah. Well, a final look at our poll results. Still, a majority of respondents say the pandemic has significantly impacted their workforce investments. As Alison said, that will force employers to continue innovating, continue raising the bar. Alison, I want to thank you for joining me today. Thank you to Alight Solutions. For those of you watching, I encourage you to click into the Alight booth in the Expo tab to learn more about the company.